Hello, and welcome to the World War Lab channel. Today's story takes us back into the dark waters of the Pacific, where submarine warfare reached a level of brutality and daring few could imagine. At 6:47 on June 6, 1944, Commander Samuel Dealey stood inside the cramped, steel-walled conning tower of the USS Harder, staring through his periscope at three Japanese destroyers slicing through the moonlit sea off Tawi Tawi. They were moving with lethal precision, tracking his submarine as if they could already sense where he would turn next. Dealey was 37 years old. He had completed 5 war patrols and was already credited with the destruction of 18 enemy ships. Now the Imperial Japanese Navy had sent Minazuki, Hyanami, and Tanikaze with a single purpose: hunt down and destroy the American submarine that had been terrorizing their supply routes for the past 3 weeks. Until April of 1944, American submarines generally avoided direct engagements with Japanese destroyers. A destroyer could reach speeds of 35 knots. A submerged submarine struggled to make 9. Between December 1941 and March 1944, Japanese destroyers had sunk 14 American submarines. Not a single U.S. submarine had ever destroyed a Japanese destroyer while both vessels were actively fighting each other. That balance changed on April 13th. When the destroyer Ikazuchi charged directly at Harder's position at flank speed, every officer on the bridge expected Dealey to dive and run. Instead, he ordered flank speed straight toward the attacker. At 900 yards, Harder fired 4 torpedoes in a spread. 2 slammed into the destroyer amidships. The explosion tore the ship apart, and Ikazuchi sank within 5 minutes. Dealey's radio report spread quickly through the Pacific Submarine Force. Expended 4 torpedoes. Destroyed 1 destroyer. Admiral Somu Toyoda, Commander-in-Chief of the Japanese Combined Fleet, did not find it amusing. Between January and May of 1944, Japan had already lost 23 destroyers. Operation Ago, the plan to annihilate the American invasion fleet near the Philippines, depended on perfect timing and coordination. Losing destroyers to submarine attacks disrupted everything. By late May, Toyota had concentrated the mobile fleet at the Tawi Tawi anchorage. For battleships including Yamato, 9 aircraft carriers, 15 cruisers, and 28 destroyers, the greatest concentration of Japanese naval power since Midway. American codebreakers knew what was coming. Admiral Charles Lockwood ordered Harder to patrol the waters around Tawi Tawi and attack targets of opportunity. For 9 days, the submarine operated without being detected. Then, on June 6 at 3 o'clock, a Japanese patrol aircraft spotted the faint wake of Harder's periscope 15 miles north of Tawi Tawi. 3 destroyers were dispatched immediately. If you want to see how Dealey's aggressive tactics played out against 3 destroyers hunting him at the same time, take a moment to support the channel. It helps us share more forgotten stories about the submarines that reshaped naval warfare. And now, back to Dealey. Commander Dealey studied the lead destroyer through his periscope. Minazuki, 1,250 tons, armed with 4 5-inch guns, was closing fast, zigzagging to throw off torpedo attacks. Behind her, 2 more destroyers fanned out into a search pattern, slowly boxing Harder into what would soon become a killing zone. Dealey swung the submarine's bow directly toward Minazuki. Range, 1,100 yards. Time to collision, 96 seconds. Every man in the conning tower knew what "down the throat" meant. You fire torpedoes straight at the bow of an attacking destroyer, then dive beneath her keel. If the torpedoes miss, the destroyer drops depth charges right on top of you. If you dive too late, the destroyer simply rams you. At 750 yards, Dealey fired 3 torpedoes. Take her down to 300 feet. Harder's bow dropped at a steep 30-degree angle. 40 seconds after firing, 2 violent explosions shook the submarine so hard that light fixtures shattered. A third blast lifted the stern 6 feet before slamming it back down. Dealey brought the boat back to periscope depth. Where Minazuki had been, there was only debris and a spreading oil slick. The destroyer had broken in 2 and was sinking, The remaining destroyers raced away, dropping depth charges at random. Admiral Toyota received the report at 9 o'clock. He immediately ordered 6 additional destroyers to join the hunt. By noon, Japanese patrol aircraft were sweeping the area every 20 minutes. But day was not finished. On June 7th at 2:30, Harder surfaced to recharge her batteries. The night was pitch black. There was no moon and heavy cloud cover, perfect conditions. At 3:12, radar picked up a contact. A single ship bearing 095, range 8,000 yards, closing fast. Speed, 28 knots. Definitely a destroyer. It was Hyanami, 700 tons, which had been searching for American submarines since 1 o'clock. Her captain, Commander Hideo Kabuki, had been ordered to return to base at 3 o'clock. He was exhausted. No one expected an American submarine to attack on the surface at night. Day ordered flank speed. Harder's diesel engines roared, pushing the submarine to 21 knots. He deliberately closed the distance, trying to slip inside the destroyer's radar detection range before being identified. At 4,000 yards, Hyanami's radar operator picked up a fast-moving surface contact. Small, closing quickly, probably another destroyer returning to port. At 3,000 yards, Kabuki realized the truth. An American submarine. He ordered flank speed and turned to ram. It was too late. At 2,300 yards, Day fired 4 torpedoes. 2 struck Hyanami on the starboard side near the aft magazine. The explosion ripped the destroyer's stern completely away. The ship rolled 90 degrees, her propellers still spinning as she slid beneath the surface stern first. Kabuki and 147 sailors were trapped and drowned almost instantly. Japanese patrol aircraft would arrive within minutes. 2 destroyers destroyed in less than 24 hours. The Imperial Japanese Navy was now hunting Harder with everything it had. Admiral Toyota was furious. 2 destroyers lost in 2 days to the same submarine. He pulled 8 destroyers away from convoy escort duty and organized them into dedicated hunter-killer groups. Their only mission was to find and destroy the American submarine operating near Tawi Tawi. Every destroyer captain received the same order: maximum aggression, no retreat. Kill that submarine. On June 8th, Day took Harder. Moving south toward the Submarine Passage, the narrow strait between Tawi Tawi and Borneo, Commander Day knew exactly where he was going. Japanese destroyers patrolled that passage constantly. Day wanted to see how many he could sink before they finally understood his tactics. At 1400 hours, a lookout reported 2 destroyers steaming in formation, Tanakays and an unidentified escort. Both were making 25 knots, running a standard anti-submarine search pattern. Day studied their movements through the periscope for nearly 90 minutes. The destroyers followed a rigid, predictable zigzag, altering course every 8 minutes. That gave him perhaps 30 seconds after each turn to set up a firing solution. He positioned Harder directly in their path and waited. At 16:30, Tanakays turned toward Harder's position. Range, 3,000 yards. Day let her close. 2,500. 2,000. 1,500. At 1,200 yards, he fired 4 torpedoes, spaced 17 seconds apart. The first torpedo missed. The second struck Tanakays near the bridge. The third slammed into the forward magazine. The explosion was so powerful that Harder's crew heard it clearly underwater, even with every hatch sealed tight. Tanakays' bow tore free from the rest of the hull. Both sections sank within 3 minutes. The escort destroyer reacted instantly, turning hard and charging Harder's position while dropping depth charges as she came. Day ordered the submarine deep, 400 feet. The explosions thundered overhead, shaking the hull violently, but no critical damage followed. After 40 minutes, the destroyer abandoned the hunt and withdrew. 3 destroyers sunk in 3 days. Admiral Toyota was now approaching a decision that would alter the course of the entire Battle of the Philippine Sea. But before that happened, Day intended to sink 1 more destroyer, and this time, he planned to do it in broad daylight, with 2 Japanese destroyers watching. June 9th, 5 o'clock. Day brought Harder to periscope depth 12 miles southwest of Tawi Tawi. What he saw froze every man in the conning tower. Dead ahead were 4 Japanese destroyers steaming in a line abreast formation, actively hunting submarines. Their sonar pings were so loud that Harder's sound operator could hear them without wearing headphones. Day had 8 torpedoes left. For destroyers meant he might get only 2 chances before they overwhelmed him. He studied their formation carefully. The lead destroyer zigzagged aggressively. The second held a steady course. That was the one. At 6:12, the second destroyer turned directly toward Harder's position. Range, 4,000 yards. Day waited. 3,000. 2,500. At 1,800 yards, he fired 3 torpedoes. All 3 struck the destroyer's port side within 5 seconds. The explosion was catastrophic. Debris shot 300 feet into the air. The ship rolled onto her side and sank in 90 seconds. The remaining 3 destroyers converged instantly on Harder's position. Day ordered the boat deep, 500 feet. Depth charges began detonating overhead. 23 explosions in the first 10 minutes. The lights failed. Emergency lighting flickered on. Hull plates groaned under the pressure. A pipe burst in the forward torpedo room, spraying seawater across the deck. The crew worked silently, repairing damage as the explosions continued to pound the submarine. After 2 hours, the destroyers finally withdrew. Day brought Harder back to periscope depth. The sea was empty. 4 enemy warships sunk in 4 days. But Day wasn't thinking about victory. He was thinking about fuel. Harder had burned through 60% of her diesel reserves. She had maybe 3 days left before she would have to withdraw to Fremantle. At 1400 hours on June 9th, Admiral Jisaburo Ozawa, commander of the Japanese mobile fleet at Tawi Tawi, received the reports. 4 destroyers lost. 1 American submarine. Ozawa did the math quickly. If a single submarine could punch through his defensive screen this easily, the anchorage itself was exposed. He sent an urgent message to Admiral Toyota. The mobile fleet needed to leave Tawi Tawi immediately. The Americans knew where they were. Toyota agreed. Operation Ago required the mobile fleet to intercept the American invasion force near the Marianas, but the operation was not scheduled to begin until June 15th. Departing 6 days early meant his carriers would arrive without proper reconnaissance. His destroyers would be scattered across multiple patrol zones. Supply lines would be incomplete. But remaining at Tawi Tawi with an American submarine systematically killing his destroyers was suicide. On June 10th at 8 o'clock, the Japanese mobile fleet departed Tawi Tawi. 4 battleships, 9 aircraft carriers, 15 cruisers, and 24 destroyers steamed northeast toward the Philippine Sea. American codebreakers intercepted the movement orders within hours. Admiral Raymond Spruance, commander of the U.S. Fifth Fleet, adjusted his plans immediately. The early departure gave American carrier forces an extra day to position themselves for what would become the Battle of the Philippine Sea. They knew none of this. On June 10th at 1630, he spotted 2 more destroyers patrolling north of the Cebuta Passage. Both were moving at high speed, executing an aggressive search pattern. Day had 5 torpedoes remaining, enough for one final attack. At 17:15, he fired 3 torpedoes at the lead destroyer. One struck near the bow. The ship slowed but did not sink. The second destroyer immediately charged Harder's position. Day fired his final 2 torpedoes. Both missed. He had no torpedoes left. No way to fight back. A Japanese destroyer was bearing down on his position at 32 knots. Day ordered emergency dive. Harder's diving planes bit hard, forcing the submarine downward at a maximum angle. 300 feet. 400. 500. The destroyer passed directly overhead, her propellers churning the water so violently that Harder's crew could hear the blades through the hull. Then silence. The destroyer was circling back. Day knew the pattern. The destroyer would make repeated passes, dropping depth charges on every run until the submarine either surfaced or imploded. Harder had no torpedoes left. No way to damage the destroyer. His only chance was to endure the attack and hope the enemy ran out of depth charges first. The first pattern fell at 1723. 6 depth charges detonated in a tight spread around Harder. The submarine rolled 15 degrees to starboard. Light bulbs shattered. Men lunged for handholds as the boat lurched. A second depth charge pattern fell 2 minutes later, closer than the first. The explosions lifted Harder's stern and slammed it back down with brutal force. Cork insulation rained from the overhead. A hydraulic line burst inside the control room, spraying fluid across the deck. For 90 minutes, the destroyer hunted Harder. 42 depth charges in total. Most detonated too shallow or too far away, but 3 exploded close enough to crack gauge glass and open minor leaks throughout the boat. Day held Harder at 500 feet, creeping along at 2 knots, making as little noise as humanly possible. Finally, at 1900 hours, the destroyer gave up. She had exhausted her supply of depth charges. Day waited another full hour before bringing the submarine back to the surface. The ocean around him was empty. No destroyers, no patrol aircraft, only darkness and the steady rumble of diesel engines as the batteries recharged. Harder limped south toward Fremantle at 8 knots, conserving fuel. She arrived on June 26 after a 17-day patrol. The moment Harder tied up at the pier, Admiral Charles Lockwood was waiting. He had been tracking Day's patrol through intercepted radio reports. 5 destroyers attacked. 4 confirmed sunk. 1 damaged. In just 12 days, it was the most successful anti-destroyer patrol in the history of submarine warfare. Lockwood awarded Day the Navy Cross on the spot. Then he asked the question every submarine commander feared. Could you do it again? Day didn't hesitate. Give me torpedoes and I'll sink 10. Harder's crew spent July in Fremantle undergoing repairs and resupply. Day drilled new crewmen relentlessly, teaching the down-the-throat attack tactics that had shattered Japanese destroyer doctrine. By late July, every American submarine commander in the Pacific had studied Harder's patrol reports. The tactics worked. Between June and August of 1944, U.S. submarines sank 14 Japanese destroyers using variations of Day's aggressive approach. On August 5, Harder departed Fremantle on her 6th war patrol. She was assigned to operate as part of a 3-submarine wolfpack alongside USS Harder and USS Harder. Commander Day was in overall command. Their mission was to patrol the waters west of Luzon and attack Japanese shipping moving toward the Philippines. The patrol began successfully. On August 21, the wolfpack intercepted a 16-ship convoy off Palawan Bay. In a coordinated strike, they sank 4 cargo vessels totaling 22,000 tons. The next day, Harder and Harder attacked 3 Japanese coastal defense ships off Baton. All 3 were sunk. Harder received credit for destroying 2 frigates, Matsuya and Hiburi. By August 23, Harder had expended all of her torpedoes and withdrew from the patrol. That left Harder and Harder operating together off Deseol Bay on the western coast of Luzon. Japanese intelligence had been following the wolfpack's movements. They knew roughly where the American submarines were operating, and they had dispatched something specifically to deal with them. At 4:53 on August 24, USS Harder submerged 4 miles off Harmon Island. Through her periscope, her crew could see Harder on the surface, 4,500 yards to the south. Both submarines were preparing to attack a damaged Japanese destroyer that Harder had torpedoed the previous day. Then Harder's sonar operator heard something that made his blood turn cold. Echo ranging. Close. Getting closer. 2 Japanese escort vessels were closing on Harder's position, CD-22 and Minesweeper PB-102. Both were moving at 18 knots, running active sonar searches. They had been hunting American submarines for 3 days. Japanese intelligence had intercepted radio traffic between Harder, Harder, and Harder during the Palawan Bay attack. They knew the Wolfpack was operating somewhere off to Seoul Bay. Hake's captain immediately ordered his submarine deep and silent. He watched through the periscope as the two Japanese ships closed in on Harder. At 5:20, Hake's radio operator attempted to warn her. There was no response. Either Harder's radio was off, or she was already preparing to dive. At 5:30, Harder crash-dived. The Japanese ships were less than 2,000 yards away. Day had spotted them at the last possible moment. He ordered flank speed and maximum dive angle. The submarine plunged downward at 35 degrees, her diesel engine still running as she submerged. A massive bubble trail boiled on the surface, marking her exact position. CD-22's sonar operator had a perfect contact. Range, 1,200 yards. Estimated depth, 200 feet. Still diving. The escort captain ordered an immediate attack. At 5:47, CD-22 made her first pass and released a full pattern of depth charges set to explode at 250 feet. The detonations bracketed Harder precisely. At least 3 exploded within 50 feet of the hull. The pressure hull cracked near the after torpedo room. Seawater blasted inside under enormous pressure. Harder's stern flooded completely within 90 seconds. The bow pitched sharply upward as the stern dragged the submarine downward. Day ordered all ballast tanks blown. Emergency surface. The compressed air system fought desperately against the flooding, but there was too much water aft. Harder could not rise. At 5:52, CD-22 made a second attack run. This pattern detonated even closer. The explosions ruptured the main pressure hull in multiple places. The control room flooded. All electrical power failed. Emergency lighting went out. At 600 feet, well beyond her maximum operating depth, Harder's hull began to implode. Bulkheads collapsed under crushing pressure. Compartments folded in on themselves like thin metal cans. The submarine was gone less than 3 minutes after the first depth charges struck. At 6 o'clock, CD-22 and PB-102 reported a successful kill. Large quantities of oil, wood debris, and cork insulation surfaced. The Japanese ships circled the area for 2 hours, dropping additional depth charges to ensure the submarine was destroyed. No survivors were recovered. All 79 men aboard Harder were lost. Commander Samuel Dealey, radioman Calvin Bull, who had earned a Bronze Star for the destroyer kills in June, and every officer and sailor who had helped make Harder the most feared submarine in the Pacific. USS Hake remained submerged until nightfall. Her captain filed a contact report detailing Harder's loss. The message reached Admiral Lockwood at 8 o'clock on August 25. Lockwood immediately suspended all submarine operations in the Seoul Bay area and ordered every boat to withdraw to safer waters. The news reached the United States in early September. The Navy Department announced that USS Harder was presumed lost with all hands. No additional details were released. Submarine operations were classified. The American public would never learn the full story of Harder's 5th patrol until after the war was over. The Japanese, however, already knew. Admiral Toyota received the report on August 26. The submarine that had terrorized his destroyer force for 3 months was finally gone. He authorized a formal commendation for the crew of CD-22. What Toyota did not understand was how much damage Day had already inflicted, and how 4 days in June had altered the course of the war. The Battle of the Philippine Sea began on June 19, 1944, just 9 days after Harder sank her 4th destroyer off Tawi Tawi. Admiral Ozawa's mobile fleet clashed with Admiral Spruance's 5th Fleet in what would become the largest carrier battle in history. 15 American aircraft carriers faced 9 Japanese carriers. 900 American aircraft went up against 430 Japanese planes. The battle lasted 2 days. American pilots shot down 376 Japanese aircraft while losing only 30 of their own. They called it the Great Marianas Turkey Shoot. 3 Japanese carriers were sunk, Taiho, Shoku and Hayo. 2 battleships were damaged, and 1 cruiser was lost. The Imperial Japanese Navy lost 75% of its carrier air groups and would never recover. But the battle might have unfolded very differently if Admiral Ozawa had arrived on schedule. His original plan called for the mobile fleet to depart Tawi Tawi on June 15th. That would have given his reconnaissance aircraft 4 full days to locate the American fleet before combat began. His carriers would have been fully supplied. His destroyer screens properly organized. His battle plan coordinated with land-based aircraft from the Philippines. Instead, Harder forced him to leave 6 days early. Ozawa reached the Philippine Sea on June 14th with his fleet scattered across 200 miles of ocean. His reconnaissance planes had burned through their fuel reserves during the premature departure and could not conduct effective searches. His destroyers were still regrouping after intensive anti-submarine patrols around Tawi Tawi, and his supply ships lagged 3 days behind schedule. When American carrier aircraft finally located Ozawa's fleet on June 19th, his carriers were still launching planes. His combat air patrol was undermanned. His fleet formation was disorganized. The Great Marianas Turkey Shoot happened because Ozawa was not ready. And Ozawa was not ready because Day had sunk 4 destroyers in 4 days and convinced the Japanese command that Tawi Tawi was no longer safe. Admiral Lockwood understood this immediately. In his post-war memoir, he wrote that Harder's 5th Patrol was the most strategically important submarine operation of the entire Pacific War. 4 destroyers sunk meant 4 fewer escorts protecting Japanese carriers. But forcing the mobile fleet to sail early meant the Japanese battle plan collapsed before the first shot was fired. Between December 1941 and August 1944, American submarines sank 1,314 enemy ships totaling 5.3 million tons. Most were merchant vessels, cargo ships, tankers, troop transports. Only 29 were warships. Submarine commanders generally avoided warships. They were too dangerous, too well-armed, and too fast. Day proved that submarines could hunt warships successfully. His down-the-throat tactic worked because it violated every assumption Japanese destroyer captains held about submarine behavior. Submarines were supposed to flee. They were not supposed to charge. When Harder charged, Japanese captains hesitated. That hesitation cost them 12 seconds. 12 seconds was enough time for torpedoes to close the distance and strike. By the end of the war, American submarines using variations of Day's tactics had sunk 214 Japanese warships, 4 aircraft carriers, 1 battleship, 9 cruisers, and 38 destroyers. The rest were submarines, escorts, and patrol craft. Japan entered the war with 63 destroyers and built 49 more during the conflict. American submarines sank 38 of them. Harder accounted for 4 in just 4 days. On March 27, 1946, President Harry Truman presented Commander Samuel Dealey's Medal of Honor to his widow, Edwina Day, during a ceremony on the White House lawn. The citation read in part, "This remarkable record of 5 vital Japanese destroyers sunk in 5 short-range torpedo attacks attests the valiant fighting spirit of Commander Day and his indomitable command." The U.S. Navy later named a destroyer escort in his honor, USS Day, commissioned in 1954. She served until 1972. Harder received the Presidential Unit Citation for her first 5 war patrols and 6 battle stars for World War II service. Her motto, "Hit him harder," became legendary throughout the submarine force. But her true legacy was the tactical revolution she sparked. Before Harder's 5th Patrol, submarine doctrine emphasized stealth and evasion. If a destroyer detected you, you ran. You went deep, rigged for silent running, and hoped the depth charges missed. Engaging destroyers directly was considered suicide. The math did not favor submarines. Destroyers were faster, better armed, and designed specifically to kill them. They changed that math by understanding one critical truth about destroyer captains. They expected submarines to flee. When a submarine charged instead, the destroyer commander had to make an instant decision with incomplete information: turn left, turn right, maintain course, open fire, all while torpedoes closed the range at 46 knots. Most captains chose wrong. By the time they realized it, the torpedoes were already hitting. Between June and December 1944, 12 American submarines adopted Day's aggressive tactics. USS Tang sank 2 destroyers. USS Trigger sank 1. USS Barb sank 1 destroyer and damaged another. USS Flasher destroyed 3 escort vessels using down-the-throat attacks. The tactic's success rate was 63%. For every 5 attacks, submarines sank 3 destroyers and damaged 1 more. Only 1 in 5 attacks failed completely. Japanese destroyer captains eventually adapted. By late 1944, they developed countermeasures. When a submarine charged, destroyers would turn away and circle back, forcing the submarine to expose. Her broadside to torpedo attacks from other destroyers in the formation, or they would deliberately slow down, letting the torpedoes run past ahead of them while closing in for a ramming attack. The tactic still worked, but the success rate dropped to around 40%. American submarine losses began to rise. Between August and December 1944, 9 U.S. submarines were lost to destroyer attacks. Tang went down on October 24 when one of her own torpedoes circled back and struck her. Harder was lost on August 24. Darter ran aground on October 23 while pursuing a destroyer. Even with the higher losses, submarines were sinking more enemy ships than ever before. The aggressive doctrine was working. Admiral Lockwood faced a hard decision: recall the submarines and return to defensive tactics, or accept heavier losses in exchange for destroying Japan's convoy system completely. He chose aggression. Between January and August 1945, American submarines operating under aggressive patrol doctrines sank 437 Japanese merchant ships and 53 warships. By August, Japan possessed less than 25% of the merchant tonnage it had started the war with. The home islands were starving. Factories shut down for lack of raw materials. The Imperial Japanese Navy could no longer fuel its remaining ships. They never saw any of this. He died 3 months after his greatest victory, killed by the same type of escort vessel he had spent a year learning how to destroy. But his tactics lived on. Every submarine commander in the Pacific studied Harder's patrol reports. Every attack plan referenced the down-the-throat doctrine. Every torpedo solution included calculations for charging destroyers. On May 22, 2024, 80 years after she sank, an underwater exploration team led by Tim Taylor and the Lost 52 project discovered Harder's wreck in the South China Sea. She sits upright on the seafloor at a depth of 3,750 feet, 12 miles west of Deseol Bay, where she made her final dive. Her pressure hull remains largely intact, except for severe depth charge damage near the conning tower. The wreck is a protected war grave. No salvage is permitted. But finding Harder meant more than locating a sunken submarine. It brought closure to families who had waited 80 years for answers. And it honored 79 men who changed naval warfare forever. Today, Harder's story lives on in unexpected places. At the United States Naval Academy in Annapolis, Maryland, submarine tactics instructors still teach the down-the-throat attack as a case study in aggressive warfare. Not because modern submarines fight this way. Today's torpedoes are wire-guided and do not require close-range attacks, but because Day's approach illustrates a fundamental principle of combat. When your enemy expects you to run, charging forward can be more effective than hiding. The Naval History and Heritage Command preserves Harder's complete patrol reports in its archives. Every radio message, every firing solution, every depth charge attack. Researchers studying Pacific submarine warfare can trace exactly how Day developed his tactics across 6 war patrols. His reports reveal a commander who learned from every encounter, refined his methods relentlessly, and never stopped looking for new ways to sink enemy ships. Commander Day is buried at Arlington National Cemetery, Section 59, Grave 874. His headstone lists his rank, his service dates, and a single line: Medal of Honor, Destroyer Killer. Families of Harder's crew visit every year on August 24th, the anniversary of her sinking. They leave flowers. They share stories of grandfathers and great-uncles who died at 22, 25, or 37, fighting a war most of them never expected to survive. The 79 men aboard Harder came from 38 states, farm boys from Iowa, factory workers from Michigan, college graduates from California. They volunteered for submarine duty knowing the risks. 22% of American submariners in World War II were killed, the highest casualty rate of any branch of the U.S. military. They knew the odds. They served anyway. Calvin Bull, the radio man who earned a Bronze Star for his role in sinking 5 destroyers, was 24 when he died. John Mao, who survived Harder's sinking and later rose to the rank of admiral, spent 50 years telling their story. He died in 2010 at the age of 90. The last surviving crewman of Harder, Paul Bryce, passed away in 2022 at 98. With his death, no one who served aboard Harder remains alive to tell the story firsthand. That is why stories like this matter. These men left behind patrol reports, radio messages, and Medal of Honor citations. But those documents cannot convey what it felt like to charge a destroyer at flank speed, to hear depth charges exploding overhead, or to watch a captain make decisions that meant life or death for everyone aboard. Official history tells us Harder sank 4 destroyers in 4 days. It does not tell us about the fear, the exhaustion, or the certainty that each patrol might be the last. If this story affected you the way it affected us, do us a favor and hit that like button. Every like helps YouTube share these stories with more people. Subscribe and turn on notifications. We rescue forgotten stories from dusty archives every single day. Stories about submarine commanders who changed naval warfare through aggressive tactics. Real people, real courage. Drop a comment and tell us where you're watching from. The United States? The United Kingdom? Canada? Australia? Our community spans the entire world. You're not just a viewer, you're part of keeping these memories alive. Tell us if someone in your family served. Just let us know you're here. Thank you for watching, and thank you for making sure Commander Samuel Dealey and the 79 men of USS Harder do not disappear into silence. These men deserve to be remembered, and you're helping make that possible.